Good evening. How are you surviving this searing heat? Are you really feeling the heat? Or you can deflect the heat? I'm Gathro Munyuki, and welcome to this week's program. Tonight on the program, we are going to be discussing mainly the heat that has been generated by the IMF Article 4 after its recent visit to Zimbabwe, where there are some issues that were flagged and which have subsequently triggered intense debate. And to discuss that with me tonight on the program is a very familiar face on this program, Dr. Prosper Chitambira, a well-renowned economist and author. Dr. Chitambira, how are you?
Thank you so much. I'm very well.
Are you feeling the heat?
Yeah. The temperatures are rising.
Yeah. Hopefully they'll bring the rains, eh?
Yeah. Projections I think are quite positive. I think to be a good season.
Sure. Dr. Chitambira, the IMF were here recently and they've released a report.
Yes.
And chief among the things that they've actually mentioned in the report is the flagging or the question marks around de-dollarization.
Yeah.
Or in short, Zimbabwe's intentions to return to the single use of the ZiG and scrapping the US dollar. From your reading, what is this likely to do in terms of confidence building and in terms of the people who are supposed to be lending the USD, the banks, to productive sectors?
Yeah. So my reading of the report in terms of that is that the IMF are basically recommending that there be a bit of clarity in terms of the roadmap towards the de-dollarization. So they're not necessarily saying that let's de-dollarize now, but they're saying that to avoid or to minimize uncertainties that arise as a result of the currency question in general, it's more prudent to come up with a clear path with timelines in terms of attainment of key market-determined benchmarks along that path in an inclusive manner. And having had discussions with authorities, I understand that it's going to be articulated in the NDS2, which the government is currently in the process of actually crafting. So obviously I agree with the sentiments from the IMF. I think there's need for clarity because uncertainties affect confidence in the economy and economic growth and development ultimately, given some of what you have said that, for example, the banking sector, they've lent money in USD, probably with different time horizons in terms of the maturity of those loans. So obviously that could present some consternation if the process is not handled very judiciously or very prudently with inclusion of the views and inputs of all the key stakeholders in the economy, in the spirit of inclusivity and leaving no one behind. Yeah.
So we tend to think that we have time, yet in actual fact we don't have time.
Yes.
So between now and 2030, do you believe that we've got time to address these things and we can actually still head towards de-dollarization and successfully too?
Well, I think that we have a bit of time, obviously, but we need to come up with clear benchmarks, especially around, say, for example, foreign currency reserves, which is an area that also the International Monetary Fund has flagged out. Yes, we have seen an improvement in terms of our reserves to about 731 million USD, both USD and gold, the gold equivalent. But that's still a bit inadequate to provide sufficient cover to the ZiG or to the currency markets. So, but also in terms of inflation, we've seen some measure of short-term stability, but the long-term inflation numbers are still on the high side, which means there's still a lot of work to be done to ensure there's long-term stability in the economy. Of course, when you talk to authorities, they are very bullish. They are way more bullish than the IMF, obviously. I'm not, yeah, so they say that we are on the right track in terms of our long-term stability. They say the annual inflation rate will come down in the next month or so. And they're actually arguing that increase in annual inflation is on account of the base effects from the devaluation or depreciation that we experienced last year, whether it was a devaluation or a depreciation. But the major point to highlight is that de-dollarization, even once the fundamentals have been addressed in terms of the economy, it's not very easy to de-dollarize because economic agents in general would prefer to transact or even to hold their wealth in the USD. So the USD is the most attractive currency. Well, of course, notwithstanding the challenges it has been facing recently, we've seen it has lost a bit of value, and we're seeing investors are now seeking haven in gold. Yeah, which explains why the price of gold is. Yeah. But generally, the US dollar is the most tradable, the most liquid currency in the world. So economic agents obviously prefer to transact, and more so in Zimbabwe, given the past experiences with hyperinflation. So there's also always that risk that we could find ourselves again back into chronic inflation and hyperinflation. So that's the downside risk again that even the IMF is also flagged out in the Article 4 report. So it's difficult to sustainably and successfully de-dollarize. Even after government announces that we are now using a monocurrency, most economic agents will still continue to hold their wealth in USD, but also even still continue to transact in USD. Why? Because when you look at the structure of the Zimbabwean economy, we are now a highly informal economy. 76% of our businesses are informal. So even if we formalize the formal sector, it means the non-formal sector may still continue to transact in the USD because the government or authorities can't really regulate the informal economy. Yeah. So I think that's one of the downside risks of de-dollarization in an environment of high levels of informality. So, of course, informality it's not something that you can address overnight. Again, of course, we're seeing the Ministry of Finance is actually implementing ease of doing business reforms directed at reducing licenses, reducing the regulatory burden.
Okay. We'll discuss the reforms, which might not be those that have been done already, but the reforms that the IMF said they should be done, and other areas where they have red flagged after the break.
Yes.
Please join us in the next segment as we discuss with Dr. Prosper Chitambira the recent report by the International Monetary Fund, IMF, which is the Article 4. Welcome back. We are now in the middle of this week's program, where we are discussing the recent report by the International Monetary Fund, the IMF, the Article 4, where the IMF flagged a number of areas where they think the country can actually do better. And we are discussing that with Dr. Prosper Chitambira, a renowned economist and author. Dr. Chitambira, we're talking about even if authorities get things right, insofar as preparing for the de-dollarization, we might still have a problem of informalization and the issue of confidence.
Yes. Those are the biggest downside risks.
Yeah. The IMF has actually said that there is a serious dominance of the USD.
Yes.
In Zimbabwe's transactions.
Yeah, which is government-related transactions.
Yeah, which is almost 83-85%.
Yeah.
Which leaves us with probably 15-17%.
Yeah.
The ZIG. And when the governor of the Reserve Bank of Zimbabwe, Dr. John Mshavan, unveiled his maiden MPS last year, he said it is the desire of the central bank to be able to see a rise in the ZiG transactions.
Yeah.
And he had said that actually by 2026, he was hoping that perhaps the ZiG would have picked probably up to about 60%. But it is actually the opposite.
Mm-hmm.
So what does this do? The dominance of the USD transactions, both, by private businesses and the government, compared to the ZiG. What does it do in terms of that machine-led confidence?
Well, I think it's a big issue in my view. But of course, it's understandable given the trust and confidence issues, given the trauma that people have actually gone through. That the ZiG is still a hot potato. So that's on the one hand. But on the other hand, the tight monetary policy stance has also not helped matters, because it means the monetary situation or the liquidity situation in general has been tightened. So that has actually meant that even people that may wish to transact in ZiG, I recall an example. A few months back, I wanted to pay fees for a niece at the UZ, accommodation fees. So it was difficult to actually get the ZiG. So I ended up paying partly in USD. So that tight monetary policy obviously is also then incentivized the use of the USD. But it also then makes it even more difficult now to in terms of our initial roadmap. Because the idea was to say by end of this year maybe to reach at least probably around 60% or 40% transaction in ZiG and only about 60% in USD. But at the moment, of course, we don't have the latest numbers, but we can safely say that probably upward of 80% of transactions are still being transacted in the USD. And even when you look at the financial sector, almost about 80% again of deposits are USD denominated. So obviously I understand the concern by the IMF that we need to have a roadmap with clear benchmarks in terms of, say, the selling of key government services and commodities such as fuel, both in USD, but also in ZiG. In fact, that's one of the points that we're actually mentioning, that a number of government services and even commodities on the market are still being exclusively sold in the USD, which obviously then continues to anchor the use of the USD in the economy.
Mm-hmm. Earlier on, you spoke about a rise in the reserves.
Yes.
Both in terms of gold and in terms of the money.
The USD.
The USD.
Yeah.
There's this coincidence there's that rise at a time when there's a huge rally on gold.
Yeah,
the price of
gold. Yeah.
So people are asking, isn't it better for the government or the central bank to buy more gold?
Yeah, definitely.
And liquidate its USD position, and then instead buy more gold. Since when they first introduced the ZiG,
in fact,
they said it was actually backed by gold.
In fact, that's what we are also seeing in terms of a number of central banks across the world, across the globe. There's actually a de-dollarization that has already started happening at a global level. We are seeing central banks are shifting from the USD towards especially gold. Gold is the safest asset, probably. It's a safe haven. And we've also been seeing that the US dollar itself has weakened in a couple of weeks or months. We've seen inflationary pressures in the US also trending up. So most investors, most central banks are actually shifting towards the USD, towards gold, away from the USD, towards gold. Yeah. So it would obviously make greater sense. Also, given the fact that Zimbabwe is one of the biggest producers of gold, so we need, I think, to be focusing a lot on building our gold reserves. We need to be building our gold reserves more.
Sure, but building the gold reserves more requires that we've got to make sure that we export less and
we import more. We export more and import less.
No. We
Yeah.
export less of that gold. Leave it to large.
Oh, sorry.
yeah, large
okay.
scale,
No,
large scale miners.
I understand. Yeah.
And
I
then you
understand.
say the small scale miners who are actually bringing in a much bigger haul than the large scale miners.
Almost 60%.
Yeah.
Definitely.
We buy everything. But do
But-
you,
but
but do
also
you foresee
clo-
that happening?
Also close the leakages. There are a lot of leakages, not just in the gold value chain, but most other minerals. Yeah.
Sure.
So it's including lithium. So
I was going to go there. So let me get there.
But I don't foresee that happening. It's by given that the price of gold has been increasing. So obviously the temptation is to export more so that you get more. But it will be strategic.
Yeah, but you see, when you expect more gold,
it means you're losing.
You're losing on your value because they're getting more US dollars, which you'd want to liquidate and say you have the store of value in the actual gold.
Yes, in the actual gold, which is an asset.
Yeah.
All
right.
Yes.
When we wrap up things, we discussed that, and obviously one of the key areas that the IMF flagged, which was the issue of corruption.
Yes. Anti-corruption reforms. Yeah.
Sure. Join us in the final segment as we bring to a close this week's program, where we have been in discussion with top economist and author Dr. Prosper Chitambira, revisiting the recent report by the IMF. Welcome back to those who have been with us from the beginning and to those who are just joining us. We are at the tail end of this week's program, where we have been discussing with Dr. Prosper Chitambira, a renowned economist, the recent report by the IMF and the areas that they think authorities should work on to make sure that the country's plans to return to the sole use of the ZiG are concretized. Dr. Chitambira.
Yes, sir.
The IMF also flagged the issue of corruption. They said there must be anti-corruption reforms.
Yeah.
You know, we have the Zimbabwe Anti-Corruption Commission. We hear a number of reports on corruption.
We do. Yeah.
We've had the president speaking about corruption. We've also had his deputy speaking about corruption aggressively.
Very passionately.
Passionately and aggressively about corruption.
Yes.
In your view, because you tend to be, detached from these things, you don't look at these things with the political lenses, like what most people want to do. In your view, what is that we must do to make sure that we institute these reforms and we show enough bite to deter people from perpetuating this graft problem that we have in the country?
I think my view is that the issue of anti-corruption reforms is a very difficult area to tackle, or these are very difficult reforms to implement. Why? Because of the very strong vested interests that tend to lose out once you begin to implement anti-corruption reforms. Even the world over, when you look at countries the world over, it's been very difficult for most countries to sustainably address the issue of corruption, especially in Zimbabwe, where it has actually become very endemic. So my view is that you then need to address some of the drivers of that corruption. For example, there could be petty administrative corruption, which could be driven by the fact that maybe civil servants or bureaucrats are not earning enough. So it means you have to address the earnings, but also make sure that there's stability in the economy, so that people's monies or earnings don't continue to lose value because of high inflation. But that's just administrative corruption. But of course, there is also grant corruption, which is very difficult in my view. But what other countries are doing is to, for example, fully embrace what we call e-government, e-commerce, the digital economy. For example, in terms of business processes, to digitize business processes, so that at least you eliminate face-to-face interactions, say, between a potential investor and bureaucrats. Singapore has done that. Rwanda has also done that, to fully digitize the doing business processes as a way of removing opportunities for maybe bureaucrats of trying to solicit bribes from investors or even potential investors. So that would be one way. And by so doing, you're also even enhancing the efficiency of government services in general. So I think that could be a low-hanging fruit that probably we have not fully leveraged, but it also probably ties into what the government is actually doing as part of the ease of doing business reforms. Yeah, but corruption is it's an institutional problem ultimately because corruption, when there is high corruption, it actually reflects a very weak and in some cases even captured institutions, like we saw in South Africa, the state capture report, which highlighted that key state institutions have been captured by a few individuals for personal aggrandizement. Yeah, but it requires very firm determination, especially from the highest offices, to root out that cancer, because it then becomes a normal way of doing things.
A lifestyle.
Endemic and a lifestyle, yeah. But it's difficult because of we talk about the political economy of corruption. There are strong vested interests that may lose out once you fully implement anti-corruption. So those ones will always resist any anti-corruption reforms there because they will lose out.
But a foolproof system can never be resisted or defeated, isn't it?
Yes.
So this could be the magical bullet to the issues of graft.
Yeah, definitely.
Fully digitization of the ease of
government
doing business.
services, ease of doing business. Yeah.
Very interesting.
It helps. Of course, you can never completely eliminate corruption. Even in the US, I was studying international economics. They actually talk about what they call protection for sale in international economics, where even business lobby groups actually sponsor even political parties in return for favorable business policies from those political parties once they get into power.
Sure.
So it's called protection for sale in international economics.
Sure.
But that's corruption.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
It could be corruption
But in Zimbabwe,
with another name.
Zimbabwe actually did a study some years back which actually found out that corruption imposes a 20% premium. It's a 20% tax on doing business.
Sure.
Yeah, so that's huge.
Just before I let you go, Dr. Chitambira.
Yeah.
A lot of people have actually said, okay, that's what the IMF is reported on.
Oh, yeah.
But we look at, from the time of COVID up to now, how Zimbabwe has actually done extremely well compared to other countries that were in better stead before we were hit by COVID.
Yeah.
And so we went into COVID with a very difficult, fragile economy.
Oh, yeah.
And we've come out and we're looking at a growth rate of probably 6.5.
Yeah.
So why would the IMF do this? That's the argument by other people.
Yeah.
But I want to ask you personally.
Yeah.
The IMF, isn't it a matter of prescriptive actions rather than trying to bring solutions, really? Or it is a matter of you bring a prescription and you also want to cure the disease, or you want to manage the disease?
Well, let me start by maybe commenting on that growth of 6.5 or 6% or 6.95%. Of course, we are coming from a low base given the serious drought that we had. But again, that 6%, in my view, is not sufficient or adequate given the huge problems that we're actually facing. So the World Bank actually says that we need to be growing by at least 15% per annum to achieve the vision of being an upper middle income economy by 2030. In fact, we should have been growing by at least 15% from 2023 up to 2030. So that's 6%. Number one, when you then look at the quality of that growth, we are not creating adequate, full and productive employment opportunities. And it's also not having a very serious dent on inequality. Actually, inequality is rising. But also poverty remains stubbornly very high at around 40% of Zimbabweans living in extreme poverty. So the poverty reduction impact of growth in Zimbabwe over the years and the employment creation or the employment intensity of growth in Zimbabwe has been very, very low over the years. Yeah. When you look at our growth performance, say, over the last 10 years, we have averaged about 2.5%.
I hear you. So I'm going to leave everything here.
Yeah.
Doc, thanks as always for making time.
Thanks so much for always inviting us here.
Sure. The these days I'm a man of very few words. I let my guests speak, and I just come in and say, well, the hit, we continue to feel the hit. But there will be something that will have a cooling effect in the weeks ahead. You have a fantastic weekend, and please wear caps and other forms of hats when you're out there in the sun, because it is really, really, really hot. So, from me and the rest of the team, we say good night.